We're all pretty frustrated about the Sabres, and losing to the Ducks certainly didn't help. Might have a rant coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. 4-2, Ducks over the Sabres. Unbelievably, the Sabres find a way to lose and get thoroughly dominated at the hands of the third worst team in the National Hockey League. The Ducks win just their 16th game of the year, just their 7th game at home. They have 33 points. They are only above the 30-point Chicago Blackhawks and the 30-point San Jose Sharks. And again, they trounced the Buffalo Sabres on Tuesday night. God bless to anybody that stayed up for that game into the wee hours of the morning to watch the Sabres get hammered. They almost came back at the end. They woke up with 6 minutes to go. They made it, after being down 3-0, they made it a 3-2 hockey game, and they were not able to finish the comeback. The empty netter for Anaheim made it 4-2. The stats in this game show Anaheim way ahead. 36 for Anaheim, 30 for Buffalo. There was 1 point in the game where it was 26-10 in favor of Anaheim. As I mentioned, the Sabres really got going very late in this game when they were already down 3-0. Jordan Greenway with a tip on a power play. Kyle Okposo with a nice shot from the slot for his 9th of the season. And then Adam Henrique buried it with the empty netter. And the Sabres now fall to 20-23-4. They are Tampa, I mentioned over the weekend, if the Sabres win on Saturday and they beat the Lightning head-to-head in regulation, they have 5 points back with 1 to play, 1 in hand. And fast forward 4 days, and the Sabres are now 11 points back of the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're 9 points back of Detroit for a final playoff spot. I got a rant brewing. We'll get to some other stuff. The Sabres and Kings matchup coming your way on Wednesday night. There's some around the league stuff, big around the league news, in fact, pertaining to expansion and arrests that we might see for some NHL players coming your way in the next couple of days. So we'll get to all that. I got thoughts on that. But I just got to get this out of my... Oh, by the way, before we get going here, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres. If you want to jump in on our text line, check us out there. The text line is always fun, even when they're losing, because we are all, it's therapeutic. We're all going through it together. We're complaining. I asked on the text line today, we were debating back and forth, who is more to blame, Kevyn Adams or Don Granato? And I heard some cases that were very strong in both directions for, who's to blame more. And here we are again, year 13. This is legitimately now, I don't even think it's debatable. It's the worst stretch of hockey any organization has ever had, ever, in the National Hockey League. No team has ever gone this long between playoff berths. No team has had this few playoff races in a dozen-year stretch like this. My droughtology of the day for the last time the Sabres made the playoffs, today's droughtology is that the Sabres have actually more days have passed between no goal and the last Sabre playoff game than the last Sabre playoff game and today. No goal is closer in the amount of days to the last Sabre playoff game than today is. That is bewildering. Dominic Hasek on the team is closer to their last playoff berth. It's been insanely long, and they don't look any closer. Fans are losing interest, and that's where it gets really scary. Not when you got people chanting to have guys fired in the crowd. It's when you don't hear anything in the crowd because fans have given up. And They started to bring a few people back, like my brother last year, and as quickly as they brought everybody back, they lost them all again with the season that they're having right now. And there is blame to go around. I compare this organization right now to a mom and pop shop. That's how it feels to me. It's how I felt with the Bills midway through their playoff drought, which was they're not even really in the league. The Bills, 10 years into their playoff drought, were so dysfunctional. We're so irrelevant that when it was time to hire a head coach in 2010, the Bills looked around and couldn't find anybody qualified to do it. Nobody wanted the job. So who'd they hire? Chan Gailey. I ended up liking Chan Gailey. But if you remember Chan Gailey, if you're a Bills and a Sabres fan, Chan Gailey was not qualified to be a head coach in the National Football League. He had been a coach with the Dallas Cowboys for 2 years a decade earlier. He had been an offensive coordinator right before being with the Bills, but was fired the season before. A fired offensive coordinator that was not that young, by the way, got hired to be the Bills head coach. Why? Because they couldn't find anybody else to take the job. They couldn't find anybody to take the job. And at that point in time, it felt like the Bills just don't exist. Nobody else in the world is doing this, but the Bills are, because they don't really exist. And that's how I feel right now about the Sabres. They're not a real team in that same way that the Bills were not a real team. This is where I say the Sabres feel like a mom and pop shop. It feels like it's just Kevyn Adams and Don Granato, the only two over there that are doing anything. And, well, not even doing anything, but the only two that are running things. And I know it's not true. I know Jason Carmanos is in the organization. I know they have an analytics department that Sam Ventura spearheads. I know they have some people in the business department. I guess John Roth is one of them in the business side. But it feels like it's just Granato and Adams. You know, it's those two, and it feels kind of deflating that you don't really want to believe that they're going to do anything anytime soon. They're not going to react to the season that they're having. And you know what? A real team, like what would a real team do? They move on from guys. They're not afraid to move on from guys. They make moves. They make trades. They fire coaches. They hire coaches. The New York Islanders, who are, 8 points, 10 points above the Sabres right now, they fired their head coach last week, and Lane Lambert, and brought in Patrick Waugh just because. The Rangers, was this last year that the New York Rangers fired their coach with like 2 weeks to go in the season, and as they were about to make the playoffs, and they brought in Gerard Gallant. Gallant, actually, scratch that. Gallant might have been there the whole time. That, I think I have that wrong. Yeah, I do have that wrong. But anyways, you know, the Rangers had made the playoffs with David Quinn before Gallant, and then they brought him in. Teams make moves and aren't afraid to do it. Teams make moves at GM. Teams make moves at coach. And now you look at a coach that I like. I love Don Granato. I really do. I like his style. But how many teams would have hired him as their head coach? Any? If Don Granato got fired today, would he ever be an NHL head coach again? Because my guess is he wouldn't be. If Kevyn Adams got fired today, would he ever be a GM again? Adams, I feel like no way. Granato at least has a long background coaching on some level. Adams had never been in a hockey department in a management role before becoming the general manager. So that's when I say it feels like a mom and pop shop. A mom and pop shop fighting with big business. And the other NHL teams are big business. And the Sabres are, mom and pop shopping it, trying to compete. And there's no wonder that it looks like it's going the way it is, and that it inspires no confidence. Jeremy White, my co-host in WGR, tweeted out this morning. I asked that question, as I mentioned on our text line, who's more to blame, Adams or Granato? And I'm really looking at Adams recently. And it's because of the constant inaction of the GM to make a trade, to make a move that will allow the Sabres to get better, instead of just sitting on our hands, waiting for the first-round picks and the prospects to come save me, because that could take forever, and sometimes it won't work at all. How are you going to hit the fast-forward button? How are you going to get better? And Jeremy put a list together. The Sabres acquired assets in trades since they traded Jack Eichel, which was November of 2021. We are about 2.5 years, two and a quarter years removed from the Jack Eichel trade. Since they traded Jack Eichel, here's what Kevyn Adams has acquired to get better. The rights to Johnny Boychuk, cap dump. The rights to Ben Bishop, cap dump for the other teams. Malcolm Subban, Jordan Greenway, that you're going to find out that's the biggest name they've acquired. Riley Stillman, Joseph Sassoni, Eric Robinson, 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th round picks, future considerations, twice, the free agent signings that they've made in that amount of time since the Eichel trade. Devin Cooley, Dustin Tokarski, Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson, Michael Hauser, Riley Sheehan, Lawrence Pilot, Cale Clegg, Jeremy Davies, Chase Prisky, Ilya Labushkin, Eric Comrie, Michael Hauser, and Mark Jankowski. That's the list. I've got, 24 names that I just read off? And the biggest names of consequence that he's brought in are Connor Clifton and Jordan Greenway. That's the moves that have been made to get better. While the Sabres have had stockpiles of draft picks and prospects, they have more money to spend in the trade market than any team in the National Hockey League. But they don't happen. And why don't they happen? I think a big chunk of it is the general manager. And he doesn't want to make a move like that. He missed the timing on when to make a move like that. The time to make that trade was the middle of last year when there were multiple great players available, headlined by Timo Meier and Jacob Chychrun. And there were others that got moved as well. The Sabres missed the playoffs by 1 measly point. And you know what? This isn't a big point that I like to make a lot, but when it comes to confidence and team confidence, look how they've gone this year, where Dylan Cousins has lost all confidence. Rasmus Dahlin has lost his confidence. I mean, he's at least fiery on the bench, breaking sticks all the time because he can't take it anymore. Tage Thompson looks like he's lost his confidence, at least on the power play. All these players that have regressed this year. You know what might have helped them? If they had the confirmation that they knew they were good enough to pull it off, to make the playoffs. If they had got one more point, they traded for Jacob Chychrun, they would have made the playoffs. They would have got one more point. If they traded for a goaltender last year, they would have got one more point. They would have made the playoffs. And then the whole group that has dealt with all this adversity this year, that is young and is the first time dealing with expectations, would have had that assurance of knowing, hey guys, we're good enough to do this. We've already done it before. But they don't have that confirmation because they didn't make the move last year. They didn't make the playoffs. And now this is happening. Now they're not even close. And everybody looks shattered. Nobody looks like they have any emotion. Playing in that Ducks game last night, nobody had any fire whatsoever. And you could blame that on Granato. I would want to blame that on they missed an opportunity last year to make the playoffs. And they should have done it. And they didn't. And still, this trade that they need to make hasn't been made because, as we've mentioned a million times, all these picks and prospects, they can't all make the team. They cannot all make the team. But, where's the move? They have to make a trade eventually. They have to make a 2-for-1 deal, a 3-for-1 deal eventually. Or what else are you going to do? You're going to just trade them for younger prospects? What? I don't get it. It blows me away that they have got to this point. Kevyn Adams, who signed Taylor Hall as his first move, 4 years ago, since that day really, has not made a legitimate win-now move, has not made an acquisition of real consequence. And you know what? Last year, you might have been able to you might have been easier to pull off that move, because you had built some goodwill in your fan base, but more so around the league. It was out there being reported, or at least rumored to be out there, that the Sabres were starting to come off of some no-trade lists because they were showing signs of life. They were showing signs of a team on the way up. And in 1 year, They've undone all that. So that now, if I want to talk trade on this show, and I go look at Cap Friendly, and there's a NTC or an NMC, no trade clause or no movement clause next to that player's name, even if it's NTC 8, which is like an 8-team no trade list, or a 5-team no trade list, or a 15-team no trade list, whatever it is. If I see those initials next to a player, I don't bother talking about them. I don't bother talking about them for the most part, because if I were a player that wasn't from Buffalo playing in the National Hockey League, why on earth would I want to become a Buffalo Sabre? And they missed the boat on it. They had a chance last year maybe to do something, and they didn't. And now, I don't know what you do. You go ahead and trade for a guy right now, and I'd get excited about it, but I don't think it's going to make a difference for the season. It's too late. They're 11 points out. They're 9 points out, I should say. All right, time out here. Enough ranting for today. I'll have more of that, I'm sure, as the season progresses here. And if they lose to the Sharks on Saturday, another terrible team, I'm sure I'll get fired back up again. But for tonight, Wednesday night, it's Sabres and Kings. I want to get into that matchup a little bit. We'll get to the Utah NHL expansion story, as well as the sexual assault story with Hockey Canada happening right now north of the border, which is a huge story in the NHL. Oh, I got some thoughts on both of those stories coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed, your matching and hiring platform with over 350 global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps keep your quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly earning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, the Locked On Mom and Pop Shop podcast. We are encouraging you to check out Locked On Sports Today if you're looking for some football coverage. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Check them out. Top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So it's not just football. It could be Joel Embiid scoring 70 points the other night. Lots of NBA stuff happening. The Trailblazers, for instance, are protesting a victory last night in a really interesting story. A loss, I should say. Check Locked On Sports Today on YouTube out and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Sabres and Kings coming your way. Okay, so this game, if you thought the Ducks game was late last night for a 10 o'clock puck drop, this game, I mean, especially for me, as someone that gets up super early in the morning, no chance I'm even making it to puck drop. I will definitely watch this game tomorrow morning, not tonight. 10:40 puck drop. It says 10:30 on the schedule. There is some sort of ceremony going on for the Kings. So you're looking at a 10:40, even maybe 10:45 puck drop for Sabres and Kings, which means if you are one of those diehards that's watching every minute of every game, you're staying up through past 1 a.m. tonight. So God bless again if you're doing that, and I hope that it goes better for you tonight than it did for the Ducks game. But hey, the way the Sabres have operated this year, they're the type of team that loses to the Ducks and then beats the Kings the next night. The Kings are not a bad team, but the Kings are going through a very bad stretch. The Kings have lost 8 of their last 10. However, 4 of those 8 losses have been in overtime. They are 22-13-9 on the season. Very strong team. They've always had good 5-on-5 stats, even when they haven't been winning playoff series in the past couple of years. This year, no different. They're a very good possession team. They're always a team that is great at, again, puck possession, but they don't have the highest quality of goal scorer. They don't have the elite offensive talent, and that really holds them back from being a dominant team in the league. They're a solid team. You know what you're going to get out of the Kings for the most part every night. I know, again, this stretch would say otherwise in the last couple of weeks, but the Kings are a team that, they probably make the playoffs, and nobody in the world would expect them to go on a deep playoff run. Kevin Fiala, their leading scorer, by the way, 41 points in 44 games. Adrian Kempe, Anze Kopitar. Those are the top 3 scorers. All good players, but Kopitar at this point at 36, and then Kempe and Fiala, that's fine. They're good players, but they don't have that elite forward. And they don't have that elite defenseman anymore either, because Drew Doughty's taking a step back. So they lack the elite talent that the true contenders really need. So can the Sabres win this game? Of course they can. However, the Kings are favored in a big way. Minus 192 on the money line for this game. The Sabres are at plus 158. We don't have line rushes at this point in time for the Sabres game at time of recording, but what I can tell you is that Devin Levi is fully expected to get back between the pipes for the Sabres, as Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen started last night. So Levi in goal for the Sabres. It is not known yet who will start for the Kings. The Kings, as I mentioned, their top 6 filled with good players, but no elite talent. Top line, Anze Kopitar, Adrian Kempe, Pierre-Luc Dubois. Solid players, puck possession players, physical players. Second line, Philip Deneau, Kevin Fiala, Trevor Moore. That's a good top 6. You shouldn't be terrified of them, though. But they are the type of team that can really smother the Sabres. Last year, if you remember, the Kings and Sabres played, I think it was 2 scoreless periods, and the Sabres were having a really tough time breaking through it. This was at home in about the middle of the year. And then the third period happened. The Sabres scored a goal to go up 1-0. And then the Kings had to kind of break out of their shell defensively and play an up-and-down style. And they got boat race. Sabres won the game 6-0, if I remember right. And that's what's got to happen in this game for the Sabres to win. You got to score right away, pull them out of that defensive shell that they love to retreat into. In net, you're looking at Cam Talbot and David Rittich. Not the best goalie combo for what they have going right now that is healthy. Phoenix Copley actually has played a few games for them this year also, but he will definitely not start tonight. He's been dealing with an injury. Victor Arvidsson, by the way, also out with an injury for LA. My sneaky parlay of the day comes with a Sabres plus 1.5 against the spread. Again, I'm going to go Sabres plus 1.5 because I don't feel confident enough to pick them to win, but because they're weird, and because they do sometimes win games immediately after they lost a game that they should have won, I'm going to go with the Sabres on the puck line, and the Kings' struggles as of late is another reason why I feel a little more confident saying the Sabres won't lose by 2 or more goals. They'll at least keep it close to a 1-goal game. I'm going to go under 6.5 in this game. The Sabres have been playing better defensively as of late. They're still not scoring themselves. I don't trust the Sabres to score enough to go over 6.5, and I don't like the Kings offensively enough to go over 6.5. So to me, 2 teams that aren't scoring a lot of goals lately, I'm going to go with under 6.5. And then I'm going to go Rasmus Dahlin to score a goal at plus 500. All these lines, by the way, available to you at FanDuel Sportsbook. Dahlin plus 500. Dahlin's been scoring a lot lately. And he's always out there in empty net situations. So you can always get that cheap goal as well. He's shooting the puck more. He's shooting the puck well this year. And I'm going to go Dahlin plus 500 to wrap up a 3-leg same-game parlay at plus 1423. 10 to win 142. 100 to win 1,423 if you are interested. Another time out here when we come back to wrap things up, a couple of around the league stories that I want to get into, including NHL expansion and a pretty high-profile sexual assault case that pertains to the National Hockey League and Hockey Canada. And there's news on that, too. So stay tuned here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Sleeper. It is past the halfway point of the year. It's not going well for our Buffalo Sabres. But regardless of that, I want to remind you, you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper, our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. Check out players that are, look, Jeff Skinner came really close to scoring some goals last night, and he's someone to maybe keep an eye on with this in mind. Check out whether it's Skinner, McDavid, Jamie Drysdale out in Philadelphia who just got traded. It can be anybody. Record more or less whether they'll record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, shots, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. And to win 100 times your bet on sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats, and you can win 100 times your money. Play daily fantasy hockey with sleepers. Start paying attention, nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You're going to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleepers terms of use for details and locational availability. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. All right, 2 big news stories in the NHL, and we're going to start with the more serious of the 2. And it's one that the news dropped on first, and then weirdly, coincidentally, and I hope not on purpose because it would be disgusting if it was on purpose, we had Utah NHL expansion news that was dropped immediately after this. Almost a I hope, again, not to distract us from the serious news here, which is that Hockey Canada is facing a scandal. 5 members of the 2018 Canadian junior hockey team are facing sexual assault charges. Players who have not been charged yet, and we do not know the identity of yet officially, have been given, according to London, Ontario police, a set period of time to present themselves at London police headquarters. A couple of sources had that. Rick Westhead, TSN, the Globe and Mail up in Canada had this story as well. This is it's a gross story because of some of the details of this young woman involved and the 2018 Canadian World Junior team. And what we know so far is that this is going to happen in the next couple of days. And we don't know for sure. But there are some players around the league that coincidentally were on that team and are taking leave of absences. It's hard not to tie 2 and 2 together. It feels like pretty easy to do it. So yesterday, Flyers goaltender Carter Hart did this. The Flyers announced an extended leave of absence for their starting goaltender Carter Hart. He was on that 2018 Canadian World Junior team. Today, the Devils announced that Michael McLeod and Cal Foote have also taken leave of absences. No other details provided, but Michael McLeod and Cal Foote were on that Canadian World Junior team. So, again, hard to not put 2 and 2 together, that those 3 players could very well be 3 of the 5. That whole team, for the most part, is filled with NHL players. So this is a big story in the NHL. And if there is enough evidence to show that these allegations are true, then I really hope that not just the authorities up in Canada take action, because of course they will. I hope the NHL takes action as well. They have not gotten it right on situations like this. That, this is even more serious, but Semyon Varlamov, former Islanders goaltender, former Avalanche goaltender, I believe he was on Colorado at the time, had been found to have committed domestic violence, or was accused of committing domestic violence a few years ago. And the NHL did nothing about it. Pretty much nothing about it. Now, in other instances, they have. Slava Voinov, for instance, I believe is one example where I don't think has played in the NHL since he also had a domestic violence incident. This is sexual assault. So I'm not comparing the two, but it's off-ice issues that are grotesque, disgusting, and I think should bar players from playing in the National Hockey League for, if not the rest of their lives, at least a very long extended period of time. So if these 3 and 2 more are found to have done this, then they shouldn't play in the National Hockey League anymore. They should definitely not play in the National Hockey League anymore. So we'll see what comes of it. We'll see if they're officially named here and who the other 2 players might be as well. But it's a big story that everybody should keep an eye on for sure. And then on a less serious note, but on a big business news front for the NHL, the league sent a statement out today talking about Utah and Salt Lake City becoming a new target for expansion. Or maybe replacing another team. The NHL said they appreciate the interest expressed by Smith Entertainment Group to bring NHL hockey to Utah. They've had conversations. They're impressed. And not only Utah as a hockey market, but a sports market. And there was also a statement made from Smith Entertainment Group. Again, this is the group trying to bring an NHL team to Salt Lake City. There's an arena being built there to get ready for the Winter Olympics that are coming in about 10 years. So they're going to have the arena for it. That's a growing market. So market-wise, they're comparable to other small-town NHL teams and maybe are even growing faster. So it makes sense there. They're a good sports town. We only have one example of that, but they support the Utah Jazz in a big way and do a great job of it. So in all those areas, feels like it would work. And I'm not surprised the NHL would be going for this. The NHL revenue-wise isn't growing the same way that other sports are. So what's one big way that those owners make money? Expansion fees. Massive hundreds of millions of dollars expansion fees. And if they can get another owner to give them $300, $500 million, they split between the 30 owners. Of course, I'm not going to anticipate they're going to do anything different. It is interesting to ponder, though. What's the line in the sand on how many teams they would want? Or is there no line in the sand? Because this would be 33. And what would they stop at? Is 34 okay? Is 35 okay? In 35 years, am I going to be looking at a 35-team league? A 40-team league? Does it ever end? I don't know if there is a line in the sand. Maybe there isn't. I've always thrown out there that my idea for a 40-team NHL where you split the two, 20 and 20, an NHL A and an NHL B, and that's how we get a relegation in North American sports. I know that's never going to happen, by the way, just in case you're wondering. But we could start talking Utah team names. The Bees, I saw, was thrown out there. The Hive, because they're really big on that. The Mustangs was another one. So, we can have some fun with that. I think probably a few years away. The other thing to keep an eye on, because of the statement from Smith Entertainment Group that basically said they already have an arena ready to go while the new arena is being built in case, and I believe it's the Utah Jazz's arena that they have ready right now, they can take on a team right now if need be. It's the sentiment that they possess. They didn't name names, but we all know that was a message to the Arizona Coyotes. Utah and their ownership group that wants to bring a team there basically called out the Arizona Coyotes to say, if you don't get your bleep together and find an arena deal as you're still playing in Arizona State's facilities and don't have a deal with any ink on it yet, then we're going to step up. We're going to take your team. And the longer the Coyotes go without grabbing an arena deal, I think the NHL becomes more and more likely to say, Yotes, we gave you 15 years to figure out a stable ownership group and a stable arena deal. You couldn't do it. We're going to end this for now, forever, and we're just going to Salt Lake City, where we have an owner and an arena that's on the way. And we have a good arena for now, a better arena than you have for now, and a new one on the way. I really wonder if the NHL pushes for that. If they finally say, enough's enough, Coyotes, you're going to Salt Lake City. Could see that. I don't know. Are Coyotes native to Salt Lake City? Maybe you could keep the team name even. All right. That's it for us. Enjoy Sabres and Kings if you're staying up for it. I will not be awake on the text line. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you want to sign up, but I'll be reading through them the next morning, and I'll read some of them on the show as you guys react to whatever happens tonight. So thanks for listening here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, making us your first listen every day. Make sure you go make your next listen if you're interested in the NFL playoffs coming up or what's going on in hockey or basketball. Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Subscribe to them on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. We'll talk to you tomorrow after Sabres and Kings, and please, after Sabres win.